This is Nightline and I am Pritha Manivannan. Your top stories. School sessions to proceed with home-based teaching and learning approach for 2 weeks after Aidilfitri. An AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine is safe and effective, says Health Minister. Good morning. We'll begin the bulletin with this story. All schools nationwide will return to the home-based teaching and learning method, or PdPR, when the education session resumes after the school holidays in conjunction with Hari Raya Aidilfitri next month. The directive will affect some 2.7 million pupils at 7,780 primary schools and 2.03 million students at secondary schools around the country.
Lepas raya ni kita tak tahu macam mana sambutan hari raya pada tahun ini. Jika kita tak tangani, melihat pada jumlah kes sporadik dalam masyarakat, melihat dalam kes kluster yang tak berkaitan dengan pendidikan pun yang besar, kita khawatir bahawa berlaku jangkitan di luar sekolah. Berlaku jangkitan pergi gaya, beraya dengan penuh kemesraan dan sebagainya, berlaku jangkitan di luar sekolah dan dibawa ke dalam sekolah, dimasukkan dalam senarai murid yang terjangkit. Sedangkan jangkitannya berlaku di luar sekolah.
The directive will also affect 170,000 students from daily boarding schools and some 100,000 students from full boarding schools who will be allowed to return to their respective homes for the festive period. This means that all schools around the country will conduct PdPR for a total of 10 days until the start of mid-year school break, which will start on May 28th for schools in Joko, Kedah, Kelantan and Terengganu, and May 29th for the remaining states. Meanwhile, Dr. Razzi stressed that schools are safe and thus face-to-face sessions will continue. He added the data available showed that schools were safe to attend and not the cause of COVID-19 clusters as claimed by various quarters. At a media conference, Dr. Razzi said his ministry is committed to continuing with the school session, as it is confident that the standard operating procedure SOP implemented in schools can curb the spread of COVID-19. He said the latest data from the Health Ministry showed that of the 99 education clusters, 52 involved schools under his ministry, with 2,274 cases. This is 4.8% of the clusters, or 2.07% of cluster cases. Of these cases, 1.42% or 1,559 cases involved residential schools and only 0.53% or 585 cases involved non-boarding schools.
Dan jika kita lihat bahawa di sekolah ini juga tempat di mana anak-anak ini express themselves bukan saja pada guru-guru tetapi pada kawan-kawan. So sebab itu mereka dah rasa lama sangat dah. Yes, we can do apa saja pendekatan PDP-nya, tapi keberadaan mereka di sekolah itu cukup berbeza dengan keberadaan mereka di rumah. Sebab itu kita lihat bahawa anak-anak cukup excited. Bila kita turun ke sekolah, tanya adik, pakcik nak tanya kalau kita nak sekolah buka ke nak sekolah tutup? Nak sekolah buka. Itu merupakan semangat di kalangan anak-anak kita.
He said the authorities would step up measures for SOP compliance in hostels, including through a task force. However, the senior minister said schools would be closed on the instruction of the National Security Council (NSC) if the situation worsened. He said under the current SOP, schools with positive cases would be closed for 2 days and the district health office would make a risk assessment to decide if the closure needs to be extended. Dr. Razzi said schools in red zones would not be closed except if they were under the Enhanced Movement Control Order (EMCO. But state governments can discuss with the ministry if risk assessment done by the Health Ministry required schools in certain localities to be temporarily shut. He said attendance in schools between March 1st and April 23rd was 90.26%, which was regarded as high. Malaysia will temporarily ban flights to and from India to stop a new COVID-19 variant from entering the country as of April 28th. Senior Minister for Security Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said ships and Indian citizens with Malaysian work permits will also be denied entry. Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri said the National Security Council (NSC) has agreed to the proposal by the Health Ministry with exemptions given to Malaysian citizens who will undergo the mandatory 14-day quarantine upon entry. He said all travellers who began from any Indian destination, be it via direct or transit flights, are barred from entering Malaysia. The ban will also apply to travellers who are transiting in Malaysia to a third country. However, exemption will be given to Malaysian citizens. Ships with voyage history of being in India within the last 14 days are not allowed to sign off in Malaysia, except for crew members who are Malaysian citizens would have to undergo the mandatory quarantine of 14 days upon entry. He said Malaysia will also temporarily bar the entry of foreign workers from India who hold valid temporary working passes. There will also be a temporary ban on international students and business travellers from India. However, he said that Malaysian students, workers, spouses and children of Malaysian citizens who are currently residing in India, as well as religious groups who were in India, are allowed entry but must undergo quarantine in gazetted stations. Non-citizens who are spouses of Malaysian citizens are also allowed entry with quarantine. Now, Malaysia will be rolling out the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine for people aged 60 years and above first, before recommending the shot for younger people. Health Minister Datuk Sri Dr. Adham said its ministry was convinced after a thorough study and assessment that the benefits of the vaccine outweigh its negatives. At a media conference on Monday, Datuk Sri Dr. Adham said with the addition of AstraZeneca in Malaysia's COVID-19 vaccine lineup, the country's supply issues could be resolved.
Kita akan gunakan kepada mereka yang berumur 60 tahun ke atas dan paling sesuai lah ya. Jadi kita ada banyak calon vaksin sekarang, Pfizer, kita ada Sinovac. Sinovac telah pun dapat kelulusan secara conditional approval oleh NPRA untuk fill and finish yang dikelangkan di negara kita. Dia akan supply 2 million every month. Jumlah dos 1 million dos, maknanya bekalan kita akan mencukupi untuk fasa kedua dan seterusnya masuk fasa ketiga bersama dengan AstraZeneca dan juga bekalan daripada Pfizer.
Commenting on the safety issue of vaccine use, the Health Ministry's Institute of Clinical Research said that a panel of 22 health experts responded positively to the AstraZeneca vaccine data.
Panel kita telah berpendapat bahawa sekiranya kita membandingkan risiko dan kebaikan vaksin ini adalah amat sesuai. Kita boleh menggunakannya untuk golongan 2, khasnya untuk pada kala ini umur 60 tahun ke atas, di mana risikonya adalah amat sangat sikit. Kita dapat daripada data sama ada dia boleh membawa kepada pembekuan darah yang sangat jarang berlaku.
Malaysia recently started the second phase of its COVID-19 vaccination program, which will involve those aged 60 and above, those with comorbidities, as well as the disabled. The third phase, which is scheduled for May, will involve the general public aged 18 and above. As Malaysia gears up for the third and final phase of the national COVID-19 immunisation program, private hospitals are taking the lead in preparing additional vaccination centres to help the country achieve herd immunity against the deadly virus as soon as possible. The involvement of the private sector was aimed at maximising access to vaccine distribution for target groups amid concerns over the pace of inoculations as the number of positive cases starts to soar again. Siva Raju reports.
According to Association of Private Hospitals of Malaysia, President Datuk Dr. Kuljit Singh, 105 out of 210 private hospitals nationwide have registered as additional vaccination centres to support the government's immunisation program. Aside from this, the private hospitals are also helping to boost the registration of the vaccine recipients, involving some 13.7 million Malaysians and non-citizens aged 18 and above before Phase 3 kicks in from May until February next year.
Whereby we will register the public who would want to get vaccinated, and so that we can list them down together with the government list. So on My Sejahtera, it will be noted which would be the vaccination center for these people. It could be government or it could be private. There are 210 private hospitals. Out of that, 105 have registered as a private vaccination center. These vaccines are free of charge. They are paid by the government. It is more of a CSR by the private hospitals to vaccinate for the government. So this is not the private vaccination program. This is the public vaccination program.
As of Friday, close to 500,000 Malaysians have been fully vaccinated. That's less than 2% of the country's total population. Due to this, some health experts have argued that the country's COVID-19 vaccination rate was lagging behind the other countries with access to vaccine supply, and this may prolong the pandemic even further in Malaysia. Dr. Kuljit, however, said such criticism on the pace of the inoculation exercise was too premature, as it was dependent on the availability and arrival of the vaccine supply in the earlier stages of the immunization program. Once the vaccination for the rest of the population gets into high gear with Phase 3, there will be an escalation in the supply, and both the public and private healthcare sectors can work together to distribute the vaccines more quickly to the public.
I think the government should allow private vaccination where patients can pay for the vaccine, especially for the economic frontliners. Some of the economic frontliners are young. They will only get vaccinated towards the end of the year. So these are the group of people who may require the vaccines earlier in order to start the economy.
Although there are some concerns over the safety and efficiency of the vaccines following the recent reports of COVID-19 infections among the vaccinated healthcare workers, the public has no reason to be afraid, as these cases are isolated and involved only mild symptoms, which are also common in other parts of the world.
I've received both of my doses of vaccination last month. Day in, day out, I'm seeing a lot of COVID-related patients, COVID patients themselves, knowing that they have COVID infection. And it really helps me. I feel really protected. And to be honest, and I will really encourage the public to take this vaccination as soon as possible.
I will advise that everybody to go for it, because as a frontliner, rather than exposed to the virus, after the vaccine, actually I feel more confident.
The fact of the matter is the COVID-19 situation in Malaysia could be much more worse without the vaccines, and only by adhering to the standard operation procedures will enable the country's immunization exercise to achieve its objective of protecting Malaysians from the pandemic and restore the economy. I'm Shiva Tanggai Raju for Nightline TV3.
Datuk Sri Tengku Zafrul Abdul Aziz on Monday justified the recent decision by Putrajaya to utilise the National Trust Fund, or KWAN, for the procurement of COVID-19 vaccines and other related expenditure. Speaking to a special media briefing, the Finance Minister responded to mounting criticism over the government's move and hit back at critics as to why they were tapping into reserve funds meant for the benefit of future generations.
Sehingga 31 Disember 2020, aset bersih KWAN adalah berjumlah 19.5 bilion ringgit. Daripada jumlah tersebut, 10.4 bilion ringgit adalah sumbangan daripada Petronas, manakala 9.1 bilion ringgit adalah hasil pulangan pelaburan terkumpul. Kita telah mewarisi lebih 1 trilion ringgit pinjaman dan liabiliti kerajaan, termasuk menjamin pinjaman tanpa sumber pembayaran balik seperti hutang 1MDB dan PFI, dan juga pembelajaran off balance sheet. Sebagai contoh, obligasi 1MDB sebanyak 40 bilion ringgit ni cukup untuk membayar kos vaksin 8 kali ganda. Ya. Jadi apakah pilihan terbaik yang wajar diambil oleh kerajaan kita yang mewarisi obligasi?
He also cited how KWAN has previously utilised 42 million ringgit for the preservation of the Paya Indah wetland in Putrajaya in response to arguments that the government never resorted to tapping into KWAN's savings, even during the 1998 or 2008 financial crises. To a question on the need to increase the allocation from the initial 3 billion ringgit announced, Datuk Sri Tengku Zafrul said the government only made an estimated allocation and did not know the exact cost at the time. In Budget 2021, 3 billion ringgit was set aside to vaccinate 80% of Malaysians under the National COVID-19 Immunisation Programme. In March 2021, a further 2 billion ringgit was subsequently allocated to the programme to expedite the inoculation process to achieve national herd immunity. KWAN was set up in 1988 to raise government savings and provide alternative financing for development expenditures. The government has given assurance that Parliament will be called to convene when the right time comes, either before or after the COVID-19 emergency ends. According to Minister in the Prime Minister's Department, Datuk Sri Takiyuddin Hassan, the government will first and foremost seek the advice of the relevant agencies, especially the Health Ministry and the National Security Council (NSC) on the matter. Datuk Sri Takiyuddin, in a media statement on Monday, said the government is aware of its constitutional responsibilities to ensure that the democratic process will continue to persist in the country through parliament sittings. However, he said the priority is now to curb the spread of COVID-19, and this includes protecting the health of all members of parliament, MPs, as well as parliament officials and everyone involved. Datuk Sri Takiyuddin said during the emergency, all quarters, including the opposition, could give their opinions and suggestions to the government through existing channels, such as the independent committee set under the emergency ordinance to advise Yang di-Pertuan Agong Al-Sultan Abdullah Riayatuddin Al-Mustafa Billah Shah on matters relating to the enforcement of the emergency. Apart from that, he said there should not be any doubt about the alleged abuse of power during the emergency, as the government is indeed functioning as usual. He said this includes the aspects of administrative monitoring by the relevant authorities, especially the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission (MACC), National Audit Department and the Public Accounts Committee (PAC). On Sunday, UMNO's Secretary-General Datuk Sri Ahmad Maslan said that the party's Supreme Council had proposed to the government that the parliamentary and state legislative assemblies reconvene during the emergency. Meanwhile, PAC Chairman Wong Kah-Woo stressed that the committee and the Parliamentary Select Committee (PSC) proceedings have been suspended during the emergency as per the Dewan Rakyat Speaker's instructions. He said both committees have been directed and informed by the Speaker of the House that no proceedings or meetings may be held. During the period, the sittings of the House of Representatives and the Senate are suspended, which in turn has resulted in PAC proceedings and meetings having to be stopped. Wong also urged the Dewan Rakyat Speaker to allow both committees to reconvene immediately to carry out their functions to monitor the government's administration and finances, especially on its expenses during the emergency. He also pushed for the government to allow Parliament to sit to give way to PAC to table its reports in the interests of the people and the nation. Drugs worth more than 17 million ringgit seized. This and more from the local front when we come back. Welcome back. Drugs worth more than 17.55 million ringgit was seized after a ketamine processing laboratory was raided and an international drug distribution syndicate were crippled in 2 operations last week. Deputy Inspector General of Police Datuk Sri Akril Sani Abdullah Sani said the operations on April 20th and 21st in the Klang Valley targeted a syndicate that was believed to have obtained its product from an illegal jetty in Kelantan. Datuk Sri Akril Sani said the syndicate used containers and also sent parcels by air and sea when smuggling the drugs out again.
Sejumlah 134 kg heroin dan 104 kg syabu bernilai 15.2 juta telah berjaya dirampas daripada syndicate tersebut.
The Deputy IGP said they also confiscated 881,353 ringgit worth of assets. That included 8 cars, 2 motorcycles, jewellery, cash and 5 bank accounts. In the second operation, he said police raided a drug processing laboratory in Rawang and arrested 8 men aged between 26 and 47. Police seized 22.01 kilograms of ketamine and 37.15 kilograms of liquid believed to be ketamine worth 2.35 million ringgit, as well as an assortment of chemicals and equipment to process it. Also confiscated were property worth 126,100 ringgit from the syndicate, including 2 cars and 2 motorcycles. In Kedah, a police sergeant was charged at Alustar Sessions Court with 3 counts of soliciting and receiving bribe 4 years ago. Muhammad Saiful Saifuddin, aged 31, however, pleaded not guilty to all the charges before the Sessions Court Judge Murtazadi Amran. On the first count, Muhammad Saiful was alleged to have solicited bribes totaling 13,000 ringgit from Abdul Rahman Mumtaz Ali as an inducement to close a narcotic case. He was alleged to have committed the offence at the IPD Kota Star on February 19, 2018, when he was with the Narcotics Criminal Investigation Division at the Kota Star District Police Headquarters. On the second count, Muhammad Saiful was accused of receiving a bribe of 9,000 ringgit from the same man on February 21, 2018 as an inducement not to continue the drug investigation. Muhammad Saiful was also accused of receiving another 4,000 ringgit from the same man for the same reason on February 22, 2018. For each charge under the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission MACC Act 2009, he faces imprisonment of up to 20 years and a fine of not less than 5 times the amount of gratification or 10,000 ringgit, whichever is higher upon conviction. The court allowed the accused a bail of 10,000 ringgit in one surety and set June 8 for mention. Still to come on Nightline, Singapore, Hong Kong to relaunch travel bubble. Stay with us. Indonesian President Joko Widodo on Monday expressed his condolences to the families of 53 crew members aboard the sunken KRI Nanggala 402 submarine. In an address to the nation, the president also said that the government would pay for the education of the children of the crew members.
Mereka adalah putra-putra terbaik bangsa, patriot terbaik penjaga kedaulatan negara. Pengabdian saudara-saudara akan terpatri di sanubari seluruh rakyat Indonesia. Semoga arwah prajurit-prajurit Iu Kencana tersebut mendapatkan tempat terbaik di sisi Tuhan Yang Maha Esa, serta keluarga yang ditinggalkan diberikan keikhlasan, kesabaran, dan ketabahan.
On Sunday, Indonesian search teams found the submarine broken into 3 parts at the bottom of the Bali Sea. Officials had received visual images of the debris from the submarine, including its rear vertical rudder, anchors, and also the outside of the pressure body. Investigations are underway for the cause of the sinking, but the Navy chief told the media he ruled out human error, saying that the correct procedures were in place when the submarine dove. India's new coronavirus infections hit a record peak for a 5th day on Monday, as countries including Britain, Germany and the United States pledged to send urgent medical aid to help battle the crisis overwhelming its hospitals. With 352,991 new cases, India's total caseload has crossed 17 million. That's rose by a record 2,812 to reach a total of 195,123, with overcrowded hospitals in Delhi and elsewhere turning away patients after running out of supplies of medical oxygen and beds. Singapore, the United States and Germany have sent vaccine components and medical equipment, including much-needed oxygen-related supplies, and help India tackle the crisis. The European Commission has also said it aims to send oxygen and medicines to India after receiving a request from Delhi. Singapore and Hong Kong have agreed to set May 26th as the launch date of their travel bubble. In announcing the matter on Monday, both cities said stricter conditions will be introduced for the travel bubble's resumption. This includes travellers having to remain in Singapore or Hong Kong in the last 14 days prior to departure, excluding any time spent in quarantine or stay-home notice. Hong Kong also requires its residents to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 before departing on the flights, with some exceptions made for children and those not suitable for vaccination on medical grounds. Travellers from Singapore will also have to download and install Hong Kong's Leave Home Safe app before departing. The travel bubble, which was originally scheduled to begin in November last year, will be suspended if the 7-day moving average of unlinked community cases in either cities increase above 5. It was deferred previously due to a spike in COVID-19 cases in Hong Kong. Let's take a look at the highlights in Malaysia's main newspapers for Tuesday, April 27th. The New Straits Times, the Malaysian Reserve and Berita Harian all focus on the increase in COVID-19 education clusters, which prompted the government to order the closure of all schools after the Raya holidays. School sessions will return to online lessons to prevent post-holiday clusters from emerging. Finally, taking the front page of Harian Metro is an article on 2 friends who died after being struck by a lightning. Don't forget to get your copies or subscribe to the online newspaper. As we wrap up Nightline this time around, let's take a look at Sir Ben Ainsley's Great Britain Sail GP team be crowned as winners of the opening event of Sail GP Season 2. In a dramatic day that saw overtakes, crashes and a capsize, the Bermuda Sail Grand Prix, presented by Hamilton Princess, was decided in a dramatic final podium race that saw Ainsley come out on top from Tom Slingsby's Australian team and Billy Bassin of France. With that, I'm Pritha Manivannan. Thank you for watching, and to all our Muslim viewers, Selamat Bersahur.